This is the story of Dracula, a creature who destroys all whom he touches. Dracula the terrifying, the feared, who sleeps in the tombs of the dead by day and arises at night to inflict his terror upon the innocent and the unsuspecting.
Oh, you must help me. You must. You're my only hope. You must.
I'll help you. I promise.
Hello and welcome to UK Cinema History. This week, The Horror of Dracula from 1958, starring Christopher Lee. And we are going to be finishing off our series on Hammer next week with The Damned. Last week we talked about their Frankenstein movie, and this week we're going to talk about whether or not their second film in this Gothic horror that they became known for series lived up to the first, which the three of us all thought was quite excellent, or if maybe it has taken a step back. I would, before I turn over to the panel, have to point out, though, that as far as respect goes, this is the one Hammer film that you can find on the BFI's top 100 British films of the 20th century. This is repeatedly ranked Christopher Lee's performance as the best Dracula in polls of like Empire Magazine held recently on the best horror films of all time. And this is a film that's held in very, very high regard. But is it held in high regard because of its historical importance, or does it hold up as a film? I think is the question that we're going to ask today. And going in PTR order, the first of our panelists is Mr. Sila Blume. Hello, Sila.
Good afternoon, Eric. Hello, hi. Hello, Shidag. I don't know if I said that correctly. And hello to everyone listening. I firstly must double check because I started the film and watched it engaged, and then I watched it again quicker today. The Dracula, I'm not sure if this is the right film, what I saw. It is 1958. It is with Cushing. It is with Christopher Lee. However, this particular story revolves around this cousin that comes from somewhere in Europe to the United States to stay with his cousins. And so, am I correct with this?
I don't remember that in this film at all. As a matter of fact, I don't think the United States is mentioned. We may be talking about, you may have one of those links that has the wrong name on it.
That must be it, because the guy didn't look anything like him, anything like Christopher Lee, not the Christopher Lee I know, even though it's quite old. It says 1958, and so I will just listen to you two, and we'll see what happens.
Oh, Sila, this will be a good way for you to decide whether you want to go back and watch the Dracula or not, based on something Hai and I have to say. I think it's a very historically important film, but as Hai and I both agreed, when it comes to films from this room, a historical importance does not a good film make. It is how, the proof is always, when it comes to the pudding, in its eating, not in its making. And with those words, I turn over to best-selling author Hai Bender for his thoughts on 1958's Horror of Dracula, starring Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing.
Thank you, Eric. Sila, it's always great to have you in the room. And just for your information, I had trouble finding the film. The only way I could find it was to rent it actually to buy it for $5 through Amazon. Um, but it was available through BFI, but I don't subscribe to BFI. So yeah, I tried to find it other ways. That was the only way I could find it. So yeah, it was a little bit. This one was a little more difficult than most of the films we cover. So sympathy on your maybe not finding what the assignment was, but it was a cool movie. I'll tell you, my favorite scene was when Arthur says, "I thought that vampires could turn themselves into bats or wolves or mist," and Van Helsing answers, "Yeah, we don't have a budget for that. So no, not in this universe. Go watch a franchise with CGI." So that was the highlight of a movie for me. Uh, the Now, last week on Curse of Frankenstein, Eric posited an alternative theory of how to see that film. So I'm going to do that for this. But first, I'm going to also going back to Curse of Frankenstein. Two things related to that. First of all, I mentioned on Curse of Frankenstein that the creature was shockingly frail and fragile, that it just didn't take very much to knock it out or kill it. And in fact, its ultimate demise was because it stumbled. So it's in this film, you've got a creature who is susceptible to, he can be killed or seriously injured from sunlight, a wooden stake, garlic, just being kept away from his native ground, um, and a crucifix, and presumably a crossword, if a crossword was in the form of a crucifix. So he's kind of shaky too. I mean, looking at it, especially since he can't turn into other creatures, and when there is a physical scuffle with a human being, he's stronger, but he's not enormously stronger. Um, so the Frankenstein's creature and Dracula in these two iconic historic films, I thought in both cases were surprisingly less powerful than the way I think of them from like the Universal horror days. Um, so I thought that was interesting to me, and the other thing that was interesting to me, in terms of revisionist looks at what's going on, I could make an argument that Dracula either has a death wish or is so bored with his existence after hundreds of years, he doesn't feel fully undead unless he's risking his existence. Because his behavior throughout this film is really hard to justify. Let's just look at the beginning. Movie starts with he calls a guy to be to he summons a guy to uh, his home. Why would you bring an outsider to your home in the first place? Because half of the hours during the daylight hours, you are totally vulnerable. You're in your coffin, and anyone can come and kill you. And yet he invites someone to come to be. And what is the burning issue that he needs to bring someone in? To index his books. Dracula needs someone to index his books. That's just insane. Um, so, but fortunately, or unfortunately, depending how you feel about Dracula's feelings about this, he invites someone who is the most inept vampire killer in film history. The guy comes in during the day. He's got an entire day to search for the coffins. But instead, he just like kind of drums his fingers waiting for Dracula to show up. He knows he's going after a vampire, so he shouldn't expect to meet Dracula during the day. He should have found the coffins and staked them within hours of his arrival. Instead, he waits until night. Dracula shows up. By the way, incredibly charming, incredibly articulate and gentlemanly exchange between both of them. And then Dracula locks him into his room, but he locks him into his room at night when Dracula is in no danger. And also, there's a window that you can easily just go through. So the guy isn't really locked in. Again, what is going on with Dracula? And then the woman Dracula is living with, the first thing she does is says, please let me out of here. I'm in a horrible marriage, which doesn't use the word marriage, but she's saying she's trapped. What kind of a miserable life is Dracula living with the one person he shares his home with is desperate to leave? And she's, based on the subsequent corpse, she's been with him for at least decades, maybe centuries. So there's all these hints of Dracula being, at minimum, desperately unhappy and possibly suicidal. And then, in fact, after all that, the inept vampire hunter does finally manage to stumble onto their coffins. There's Dracula right in front of him in his coffin. He's got the stake in his hand. And what does he do? He goes and kills the woman. Now, if he'd killed Dracula, according to lore, the woman probably would have died simultaneously. But not someone who believes in work smarter, not harder. He goes and he kills the woman, which wakes up Dracula. And then, he basically sealed his fate. The other interesting part of that scene is Dracula's in the coffin. He kills Dracula's significant other. And then he turns and he sees Dracula's coffin is empty. And then we see Dracula up at the stairs, dramatically appearing in the entrance and walking down. Well, that means Dracula must have gotten out of his coffin, walked up the stairs, presumably to do what? To go to the bathroom? It's so odd. And then he comes, and then he has his dramatic entrance going back down the stairs, closing the door. But it's like, where did he go in the first place? He was right there. He didn't need to go up the stairs unless it was, to take care of some sanitary need. So that whole opening scene is utterly bizarre. And then just to compound that, Dracula hangs out with Lucy and Lucy's brother and Mina. And Van Helsing is there. Van Helsing is a more competent vampire hunter. So why does Dracula keep coming back to a family that he knows Van Helsing is keeping an eye on? And why does he ultimately put his coffin in the basement of that family? He's begging to be killed. This is a Dracula who had just tired of being alive after all these centuries. And ultimately, what happened was what he wanted to happen. Now, you may scoff at this interpretation, but now I will read something from IMDb. According to Christopher Lee, he tried to play the character of Dracula according to his theory of, quote, the loneliness of evil, end quote. He had developed this theory after reading the original novel. In Lee's view, Dracula feels lonely and does not actually want to survive. Dracula continues existing because he feels that he has no choice. I rest my case.
You know what, though, Hi? That crazy theory makes more sense than the fucking movie. So I'm gonna. You know what? That's actually a better movie than the one we watched. I hinted last week. I thought that this was a drop off from Curse of Frankenstein. I think Curse of Frankenstein was a masterpiece, quite honestly, by comparison. But Dracula, and I gave Jimmy Sanister all the credit for what was great about Curse of Frankenstein. I got to give him some blame here. And the number one thing is he became a victim of his budget. Curse of Frankenstein made 70 times its budget back at the box office. And you would think any other studio would plow that back into the next film. But this is not any other studio, of course. This is Hammer Studios. And so they said, well, if we could make that much money by spending 120,000 pounds, what can we could make more money by spending 80,000 pounds. And so you have a huge castle without a single servant in it. The one excuse being is the maid is off seeing relatives. And I'm telling you, if that maid is the only employee in that huge castle, that is spotlessly clean from top to bottom, by the way, she's not coming back. Because she is being viciously overworked. But of course, the point is probably that there's no maid at all. That he made it up that he only lives with his unnamed bride, who in the credits, by the way, is called Vampire Woman. She isn't even given a name. But I will give Hammer credit, though. They hired a great set of boobs, and they set them off very, very well. So as far as Hammer glamour goes, re-employing Valerie Gaunt from Curse of Frankenstein and putting her in that outfit was an excellent choice. And there are a lot of excellent visual choices. For instance, the crucifix in the hand turning into a stigmata when they discover that Mina is a vampire. Wonderful. I actually think the ending fight scene is very, very innovative. And I think the visuals of the castle, how everything is lit underneath in the castle, but then when they cut to the only other set that Hammer paid for, things are front lit, so you get a difference between how things look in the castle and things look in the real world. But that raises the next question for Sanister, which is the geography of this thing, because of course, supposedly Van Helsing was in England, and he traveled to Transylvania and then to Germany, and there's a border crossing which provides some great comic content, and there's all sorts of hints as to having to travel this distance or that distance. But what is the exact geography of this? Because of course, Hammer wasn't going to pay for a boat to go from England to wherever this is, because of course the word Transylvania is never used. These three places, England, this place in Germany, and whatever is filling in for Transylvania, Dracula's homeland there, all seem to kind of abut each other. They're all on the border of each other for, again, budgetary reasons. You pointed out a very good one that Van Helsing says that it's only a legend that they can turn themselves into bats and they can only turn themselves into werewolves. Something that the immediate sequel to this, Hammer goes back on when they found a way to cheaply make it look like a bat could turn into a wolf and into a what kind of looks like a plastic flying bat that you could see the strings on. Again, but I'm not going to let Sangster off the hook by saying he was a victim of his budget, because if you look at films throughout the ages, that is the key thing that a writer has to overcome. And creating within a budget a full world is, it, as old as time itself. You look at Monty Python and the Holy Grail was shot for a budget like this. Hundreds of films. Taxi Driver was shot for the 1976 equivalent of this budget. You can achieve these type of things if you write for the budget you have. And I think this feels like, I don't have proof of it, and I've never seen anybody say this, but this feels like a more expensive script got turned into Hammer, and instead of rewriting it to the budget that they had, they just said, okay, cross the boat out, cross this out, and didn't make any explanations. And so those are my negatives on the film. I do think this is a step backward also on an intellectual basis from Curse of Frankenstein.
Wait. So don't pile too many ideas at once. Let's deal with what you just said. Then we can go to the next topic. Let's deal with what you just said. First of all, I watched a couple of interviews with Christopher Lee, and he says the genius on the film was Bernard Robinson, who was the production designer. He said he managed to take things that were on a very low budget, very, very small sets, and make them look much bigger than they actually were. So let's give credit to Bernard Robinson for what he accomplished, because I think the film looks pretty damn good, frankly. And the things, that those kind of logic things in terms of geography, I don't really care much about that. I care more about character logic than geography logic. I thought the film looked great. And I also think that this film is actually more powerful than Curse of Frankenstein because sometimes a film, because a film is a bunch of different elements, and sometimes elements just come together in the right way, and magic results. And I think that's what happens here. The script doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I think the production design is wonderful. I think the score by James Bernard is amazing as well.
Oh, I agree 100%. I think it's his best score of all the Hammer films. And I have that on my list of positives.
And I also, and I think, obviously the performances by Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee are amazing. And everyone's pretty good. I mean, it's a strong cast, and Terence Fisher did a solid job. I was interested in Christopher Lee was talking about Fisher. He said he's really an editor, which is not a very complimentary thing to say about a director. He's really an editor. What we're saying is he wasn't good at telling the actors what to do, but he knew what he wanted. And when you did it, he recognized, oh, that's what I wanted. So he could recognize it when he saw it, but he wasn't very good at directing. In other words, at telling the actors how to go about what he wanted, or communicating what he wanted. But if you stumbled into it, he would say, yes, that's it. That's what I want. So, or that's closer. So that's interesting. But, being a good editor is a really important skill as well, knowing what it is you want and recognizing it. So I think there are a lot of really wonderful elements that came together also, and I think this is, for me, this is critical, is the element of sexuality and sensuality, which is pretty much absent in Curse of Frankenstein. And here, I would say, I would argue it's the most important element. I think the most important scenes were the close-ups on the women's faces, all the women's faces, as they awaited Dracula coming to bite them in the neck. That look of anticipation, of desire. Yes, please come and take me. That to me is what really makes this film work, and that and just the virility of Christopher Lee and the animal, that combination of animal and gentleman, which, by the way, is kind of what makes James Bond work as well. So I think those are powerful. Actually, sex is also what makes James Bond work. So you could think of this as being kind of like the horror version of James Bond, if James Bond was the villain or the monster. But for like when Mina comes back, and she's wearing that fur around her neck to hide the fact that she's been bitten. They did that scene several times, and she couldn't get it right. And then I think it was Terence Fisher once, in time when he was able to communicate. I said to her, "Imagine that you just had the best sex in your life, and now you're coming into the room." And with that bit of direction, she did the scene, one take, print it. That was it.
And that look on her face is just wonderful. I mean, yes, absolutely.
Exactly.
And that was my next point, actually. Hi. I'm sorry, am I interrupting? Go ahead if you haven't finished.
Well, I just wanted to say that on a script level, I don't think that had anything to do with the budget. I just think that things don't kind of add up on a character and logic basis. For example, when the maid takes the garlic away, that's infuriating. But what was really going on there, if you think about it, from my perspective, what's going on there, Van Helsing understood this is life and death. He doesn't really make sufficiently clear why it's life and death to the people taking care of Lucy, and B, he doesn't tell the maid, he doesn't convey the full gravity of it. It's a communication issue. If he had done a better job of explaining why the garlic has to be there, the maid would not have moved the garlic and Lucy would still be alive. So I would argue, and Van Helsing is supposed to be the super professional vampire hunter. I would say he's responsible for Lucy's death, for being lousy at communicating.
He had the diary. He doesn't show him the diary until after Lucy dies.
Yeah, because
he had the
Yeah, 'cause
diary. He could have shown them the diary. He's like, oh well, that's rather unfortunate. Here, look, these are his words.
Also, you could say, have you ever been to your local inn, which has garlic everywhere? Have you ever thought to yourself, why do we have garlic everywhere? Maybe there's a reason. Like, wake up to where you're living. So these have nothing to do with budget. These are just, weak bits of writing where you're violating character, where you're having characters do stupid things to move a plot along. That's bad writing. And by the way, the scene that you praise, and I agree with you, it's the best scene in the movie, the end, when when Van Helsing jumps on the table, rips the curtains to expose the sunlight, and then grabs with two candlesticks. to form a crucifix. According to Christopher Lee, excuse me, I don't remember, it's either according to Christopher Lee or according to a film critic. I watched so many videos, it kind of blurs together. According to somebody in my research, that was not in the script. That was Cushing's idea. It was Cushing's idea to rip the curtains off. It was Cushing's idea to take the two candlesticks and make them into a crucifix. Because he was saying, too many like silver crucifixes. We can't do that again. We have to do something fresh and different. Also, they wanted to use a stunt person to jump on the table and grab the curtain, and Cushing was insistent that he wanted to do it himself, and partly because it was his idea. So, yeah, the best scene in the film was from Peter Cushing, not from the screenwriter. And that's why I was saying, remember last week, you kind of scoffed at this, but I was dead serious when I said you can't really be sure how much of a good stuff you can attribute to the screenwriter in the Frankenstein movie, because Peter Cushing was not a big fan of the script, and he would rewrite lines. And so I really meant it when I said we can't know which great parts came from Cushing as opposed to the script. And that is the case here as well. And by the way, just to push that point home, this was a huge hit for Hammer. In fact, the head of the studio at one point said this movie saved the studio, which was in dire straits before Frankenstein in this movie. So why weren't there a slew of Dracula movies after this? It's because Christopher Lee was so disgusted with the quality of his scripts for his sequels that he refused to do them. He did one sequel, which was reportedly a good movie. I haven't seen it. I think it's Dracula, Prince of Darkness. And then 8 years went by where he kept saying no, no, no. It's not because Hammer didn't want to do it. It's because he was appalled with his scripts. The question is, why couldn't Hammer come up with better scripts? That is a mystery to me. Maybe Eric, But he went 8 years, and finally, and he wasn't going to do it still. And then finally what they said to him was, look, Christopher, we've already sold it to the Americans. And we sold it with a promise that you would be Dracula. If you don't do this, you're putting everybody in the production out of work. Peter doesn't get to work. The crew doesn't get to work. The rest of the cast, nobody will get to work because you don't like the script. And he finally was won over by that argument. But he didn't have to do it because he was making lots of other movies. There's the other thing that really makes Christopher Lee really irritated was, and the press had this trope about Christopher Lee was typecast as Dracula, and it made him really upset. And the fact was, no, he had lots of other roles, especially after he moved to America. He had tons of roles. He did not feel typecast because he made tons of movies. He made a movie with Billy Wilder, for goodness sakes. He was in Star Wars. He was, he made tons of movies in all kinds of roles. And he was extremely successful, not to mention stuff like Wicker Man. So he did it because he did it despite the quality of his scripts. And in fact, it's pretty much universally agreed those other sequels are terrible movies. So yeah, it is an issue in terms of the scripting, and I don't know if Hammer just had an attitude of script writers are supposed to be paid this much and no more. But it's kind of a tragedy that the scripts weren't better than they could be, and it makes me kind of sad.
Well, I'm going to stick up for some of the sequels, not the ones with Christopher Lee in them, but the Karnstein trilogy, especially Vampire Lovers, I think are great films. But
I was
you
talking
dovetailed it.
specifically about the Christopher Lee
Oh yeah,
Dracula.
yeah. Dracula 1972 is a very good one, and a well-written one. But yeah, the rest of them, pretty blasé. Yeah, yeah. They just rerun the same plot over and over again, which is unfortunate.
Also, if you notice that Christopher Lee doesn't have lines in those movies, it's not that he didn't have lines. They gave him lines, and he refused to say them because he felt they were so awful. He refused to say them. That's why all he does is snarl in those movies.
Well, that's if you take Christopher Lee's story, but Christopher Lee tells a lot of stories, and I never know what, you know how it is with Hollywood. But you did dovetail into my next point, which is, while I think this film is a step back intellectually from Curse of Frankenstein, it is a huge step forward for Hammer viscerally. And you luckily, I don't have to go over the production design, which is just absolutely top to bottom excellent in this film. That it does not show a bit of its budget. That castle is scary as heck. But the other thing is, yes, exactly. This is the film that introduces real sex into the Gothic horror genre, and it goes after it, and I'm not just talking about the Valerie Gaunt boobage, although it is wonderful. But the women in this are Hammer glamour personified, and I really think why this film sticks with people is because all these years later, what is it, 60 whatever years later, or almost 60 years later, it's just as erotic and just as unnervingly erotic as it would have been to a 1958 audience, despite the fact that we have grown, where I can just, with 2 clicks on Google, watch 2 people fucking in real life. This film had, major turn-ons in it, and I think that's a huge achievement, and I think that is one of the reasons why this is a historically important film. The other thing that this film does extremely well is the Hammer, what I call the Hammer coziness. This film is very rewatchable from beginning to end, and where, like most of the Hammer Gothic horrors, it's not a scary film. You're never really scared. It is a cozy film, and that goes to your second point, which is character and performance. And I know I said this last week, but I'm going to say it again. This film without Peter Cushing is not a quarter as good. And you mentioned that he was the one who came up with that ending sequence, and it was all of that goes to show what he had a complete genius for, which is props. And I'm going to take a smaller moment that you may not even really notice if you're not a big fan of Cushing the way that I am. The way he lights a cigar with a match when he's talking to what's his name, the brother-in-law, and that tiny little bit of business and just the perfection of it. The way he is when he is examining after the blood transfusion and feeling her neck and grabbing instruments and just his work with props, the physical performance of this film is a masterclass. And then when you add in his pitch perfect vocal delivery and those sharp suits, I mean, and as you pointed out, Fisher has made an extraordinarily beautiful film to look at. Yes, this was the first time you saw blood in color, where and so of course that opening shot, you have the oversaturated red over Dracula's gravestone, and you think, oh boy, we're in for it. But we are in for it, but it's because it is an absolute visual treat. And whether it's bite marks on the neck, whether it's the staking through the heart, each and every single one of these things has so many loving details. The fact that the diary has the little gold emblem with his initials on it, all of these little bits of both set design and directorial genius. The way he uses a wide-angle lens at a low angle to make a room look huge, that when you step away and you notice that it's only 2 steps from the doorway where Dracula enters to the center of the room, and you realize it's actually a rather small room, but it feels huge. And as a visceral experience, this was a huge step forward. But like I say, I prefer Curse of Frankenstein because it appealed to me both on a visceral level and on an intellectual level. We're not going to have the same kind of conversations stoked by this film that you would by, as we did last week about Curse of Frankenstein, because it's not written on that level. And because it is so much easier to talk about intellectual things and how they affect us than it is to talk about how things attack our visceral senses. But this is a film that is, you use the word sensual, because it envelops all your senses, whether it's the score, whether it's the lighting from underneath, whether it's the matte paintings of the background, even the comic relief where Dracula's coach breaks through the border. He just finally repairs it, and then Van Helsing and his cohort break through the border with their coach right afterwards. The matte painting in the background is a work of art in its own. That's something that you could hang up in a museum. I mean, there are so many things about this film that make it watchable and entertaining, and because there's so much time taken to these to give these characters life and breath. I feel Van Helsing's determination. I feel his drive. I feel the brother-in-law's loss, first at his sister's fiance, and then at his sister. And you have that moment where Van Helsing is willing to use his sister as bait to get Dracula. And it's such a well-developed character that you're like, yes, that's something that this Peter Cushing version of Van Helsing would do, because he's been kind of established as that kind of character. And when the brother-in-law says the brother says absolutely not, that's in the character that has been built. We feel it. And then when he's regretting later because his wife has gotten bitten that he didn't listen to him and allows his own wife to be used as bait for Dracula, you feel that tension, that tearing apart, like, oh my God, I'm putting her to rest, but is it really her, or is it just a shell of her being controlled by Dracula? And these types of things and these type of emotions are again visceral. They play on your heartstrings but without pathos. You don't feel sorry for anyone in this film, except maybe suicidal Dracula in High's version, which, like I say, I think High's version is actually a better screenplay than the one that Sanister provided. You don't feel sorry for these characters. There's nothing maudlin in it. You feel emotion, and where nothing in this film scares you, it moves you in an emotional way. And so where I think, like I say, from a writing standpoint, from an intellectual standpoint, I think this film takes a huge step back. And we make fun of things. I make fun of the spotlessly clean castle with absolutely no servants in it, and the lame excuse being the one servant that they didn't want to hire an extra for is a visiting family, or what have you. These are things that while you're watching the film, it's very easy to overlook when you are being sucked into what Hammer did so well, which is another world. And they're classified as horror, but they really, to me, almost feel like fairy tales, like something that Aesop would have written. You know, they have a scary premise, but they really do. It really does. Now, this and Curse of Frankenstein were both done in Technicolor. Later on, for probably budgetary reasons, but it worked out in their favor, they would move to Eastman color, which automatically gives kind of a dream-like look to a film. With the Technicolor, they had to do some things with the processing. So to get the blood to desaturate, they had to use 2 instead of 4 color Technicolor for those scenes, which is why you have everyone dressed in either black or gray, and you don't have a lot of whites in those scenes, is so that you don't notice in the color processing that you're missing some of those colors, but it makes that blood look saturated at the right level. It looks like blood, which is, if you look at even like a James Bond film, or even some of the really, really high budget films of the 1950s and 60s, blood does not look like blood because Technicolor just doesn't shoot it right. But the fact that they took that amount of care to make the blood and the color red in this is such an important thing. And like I say, you get that one desaturated blotch of blood on Dracula's gravestone, but that sets the tone throughout. And the film is color coded with red, and the bits of red, the props that Cushing picks up that have red handles and things like that throughout this film. This to me was a case that the auteur theory people make, which is that that a single author working with his production design and telling people what to do can create a film, no matter how weak the screenplay is, you can still have a great film. And this is how they talk about directors like John Ford and Howard Hawks as the auteur of the film, because this film is not just watchable, but in many moments brilliant on a visual level, even if what's coming out of the characters' mouths doesn't make as much sense as it should, and even if the actual Dracula in the story is rather disappointing. So when I say that I think Curse of Frankenstein is a better film, I don't want to say that this was a bad film, and I don't regret picking it for UK cinema history. And when I point out how well regarded it is, that's why it's well regarded, I think, not for standing through screenplay.
Yeah, it's really a matter of where you're putting your weight. We agree on the details, and I think you did a absolutely wonderful job describing those details, and thank you for it. It's just a matter of what you want to value more. The thing about fairy tales, that's something Christopher Lee says, and I think that's like the biggest bit of BS that I hear him saying. Of course, it's a horror film. It's a horror film. Don't be. I think it's like being disrespectful to the genre that made you famous to say it's a fairy tale. I just think that's garbage. It's a horror film, and own up to it and embrace it. Be grateful for it. Horror made you an international star. You moved on to other things. That's great. But don't say it's not a horror film. That's just crazy. So, but otherwise, I pretty much agree with everything you said, except, excuse me, in terms of which is a better film. Um, I think there's a reason that the Dracula film is in the best 100 lists and Frankenstein is not. Because, we go to movies to be moved. We go to movies to feel and to be visually entertained. And I think on those levels, as you said yourself, this is a excuse me. Excuse me. This is a level or several levels above Curse of Frankenstein from a year before. They really learned their craft, and this is a better film in visually and also emotionally. It makes the audience feel. And, I'm not as enamored of the Curse of Frankenstein script as you are. I just think Frankenstein inherently is a more intellectual kind of story because you do talking about science and the nature of creation, why are we here, can we play God, should we play God, are we not God? Um, is it a sin to say, I am God? Or is it actually a spiritual acknowledgement that we are all God? Because that we're all part of God. And so how can it be wrong to explore anything? How could it be wrong to explore creation? I think, Frankenstein, it's the perversion of seeking of knowledge that is the sin there, because of motivation, not because he was looking to um, discover things that hadn't been discovered, but because the way he chose to use them was for his own selfish reasons rather than to help people. And also because of the methods he would go to pursue his research, which also meant caring nothing for people. Um, so those are really interesting issues. And in Dracula, it's basically we've got a killer, we know who he is, we know where he lives, we know who he's targeting, um, but we're having trouble catching him. It's just a very different intellectual vibe, and that's inherent in the story. So I wouldn't blame the screenwriter too much about that. I mean, of course, he had the option to make it a much more complex story, but then maybe. I mean, I think he should have, honestly, but I just think the sensuality elements and the sexuality elements and the visual lushness of the film um, make it at least the equal of Curse of Frankenstein. They both offer treasures. They're just different types of treasures. And it's a little bit of an apples and oranges. But I don't think this was a step backward. I think it just, what it's great at was different. But they're both really important historically, and they both still hold up as films that are worth seeing and films that will still make you feel things emotionally. So they're both successful films.
Well, and another big difference. Oh, go ahead, Sila.
No, I just wanted to say that I, the way I understand, even though I haven't heard it, but the way I understand what you said about what Christopher Lee said in terms of being a fairy tale, I could imagine that he's not. Okay, what I understand from that is he's not necessarily putting the genre of horror down, but addressing what maybe a lot of people are thinking that live around that area of Europe, that this is actually a legend that has been turned into a horror industry, but actually is not a fairy tale in terms of something nice and cuddly, but in terms of a story, a simple story, but more of a legend, not connected to any reality. And I just wanted to add what the problems I had before. What I saw was actually, let me go back to that. It's a film also from 1958. It's an American interpretation with Paul Landris as the director and Francis Lederer playing um, Dracula. It was it was good, but I'm really excited about hearing you speak because I've never because I didn't watch the film. I'm perceiving very differently the way you're talking about it and the details because I have nothing to add to it, so I absorb it in a very different way. So I find that very interesting. But while I was doing this week of other things, including trying to do something for Klaus Kinski, I watched a couple of his movies, one of them being a very good vampire film called Nosferatu the Vampire. And when you get a chance, I think you should see that movie. It's in English.
Oh, 100% agree. 100% agree. But the director of that particular film is somebody that our chatter room is going to be doing a series on.
I see.
So,
I enjoyed the film. It was very sweet in some ways. Yeah, that's all.
I'm sorry. What was that about Chatter? I don't know anything. I don't know anything about this.
we're doing a world history. We're going to be doing a world cinema history on Chatter, and so we're going to be doing, and we're going to start in Europe and move our way through Africa and South America, and we're going to be doing it one country at a time. And that's what we're going to do as soon as Chatter's out of beta.
What's the
It's
name of
months
the
away.
channel? Oh, months away.
It's called, World Cinema History. We have a room. We set it up. And we had an opening room, but we're going to wait until Chatter's out of beta before we start launching them.
Well,
But,
Chatter can't even record yet, so yeah, you'd have to.
Well, I would just screen record if I had to. I've got a backup plan for that, but it's just more that it's just too glitchy right now, and I want to be able to take advantage of it. But that is something that's in the works. I had hoped it would be up and running by now, but the technology just isn't there yet because we're going to be able to view video clips in it, and it's going to be much more interactive than this room. So. You heard it here first. Yes, we are going to be having a spring off series. I had talked to Sila and Yazzie about it, but hadn't gotten quite to talking to you about it yet. Hi, but yes, World Cinema History on Chatter is coming in the future, but not in the near enough future that I can make too many more plans.
I'm curious why Chatter? Because this room is obviously on Clubhouse. Why would you not do that on Clubhouse and maybe at some point in the future move, if you're going to move both houses to Chatter? Or is the idea that you want to have 1 foot in Clubhouse and 1 foot in... I'm just curious what your reasoning is.
Yeah, I want to have 1 foot in both, number one, so I can keep both audiences. because I'm not number one. And number two, it's going to be a totally different thing. It's going to be more visually. We're going to have clips. We're going to have shots. We're going to have music. We're going to be playing out scenes and things like that. It's going to be a much more high tech room, and chatter is going to be, once it's out of beta, going to be amenable to that, which none of those are available here on Clubhouse. But I think this is perfect for recording a podcast, which is what we're doing here, and so I'm going to definitely stay on Clubhouse for UK cinema history. I don't at the current time have any plans to move UK cinema history over to Chatter. I think it's going to be something that we do here. Not a promise, but I don't have any of those. I don't have any plans to move it at the present time. I did want to follow up on the fairy tale element, and you're right. These are horror films, but they're not in the traditional sense scary. When I think of a scary film from this era, I think of something like Psycho, which literally, you shout, you scream, the audience goes, ooh, and what have you. And Hammer films aren't like that in that kind of scary. They are much more about mood and setting and eeriness. And I think that is what Lee is talking about now. I think you're right. He's also trying to be a bit of a snob. But then you look at some of the very bad Hammer films that he was in, like the Mummy series, which those are just every one of those are just incredibly bad films. The reason why we're not doing any either the Mummy or their version of the werewolf, and we've gone to one of their the Joseph Losey the Damned next month. The reason why we're skipping over those is because they are both not scary, and they also kind of are a bit almost too cozy to be entertaining. Where I think this film, Curse of Frankenstein, the Karnstein trilogy, and quite a few of the kind of off sequels, like Vampire's Kiss that they did, do a very, very good job with that. But next week, when we're talking about the Joseph Losey directed The Damned, we're going to see a different side of Hammer, which is that they made some very low-budget and gritty films that have a lot of, I think, text and depth to them, and that while they weren't paying people anywhere near what they were worth, they were able to take advantage of someone like Joseph Losey, who studied under Bertolt Brecht and was Brecht's favorite stage director before he ended up being blacklisted by Hollywood during the Red Scare, and available to Hammer to work for cheap on their film. And so, next week, we're going to get to see how someone who came out, who was the original stage director for the Threepenny Opera, operates under Hammer under a Hammer budget with Hammer restrictions, and I think it's going to be a fascinating look. That film is available on YouTube in a not very good copy. There's a restored version of it on BFI, but I think next week when we're talking about that film, and we can talk again about whether that is a step forward or a step backward. But they also made a series of thrillers that Jimmy Sainster wrote, such as The Nanny, which starred Betty Davis. They were able to use Peter Cushing. This is his only. Last week was his only real role as a villain. But they created kind of this Van Helsing personality around Peter Cushing, and And when it's great because he's great. And when it's not, you can kind of see him rattling around in a role that's too small for his just enormous talent. But when I talk about Hammer as being as a fairy tale, and I wasn't aware that Christopher Lee had also used that phrase, it's that coziness that it makes me feel. And I think when Hammer misses the boat, it's that they're both neither cozy nor scary. But I don't look back at any of the Hammer films and say I was at any time scared. But those are going to kind of be my closing remarks. Hi, do you have any closing remarks?
I've got more than closing remarks. I got lots of remarks. So first of
Excellent, good,
all,
because we're running short on time, so we need more. We need more material.
first of all, regarding the film we're doing next week, um, I searched for it under the title "The Damned" and I couldn't find it. Then I looked for "These Are the Damned" and I found it. So for anyone listening, um, it is on YouTube if you search for "These Are the Damned," and it is also available on several free, like Cinema Box, several streamers that
I'm
provide
sorry to
it for
interrupt.
free with commercials.
The Tubi print is the best of the three prints. Just to get that out there, I apologize, but the print they have on Tubi is the restored print. The one on YouTube is not.
Did you look at the print that's called "These Are the Damned" on YouTube? Because it looked good to me.
Um, that was the one. Yeah, that is the one I pulled up, and it's got some scenes missing, and
Oh, okay.
yeah,
There's no way I'd know
yeah.
that. So I'll watch it on Tubi then. I thought it looked great on YouTube. And it's wonderfully moody. It's amazing. So yeah, that's all fascinating. It's a really odd, quirky film, and it hasn't even gotten into the genre part yet. It's a very interesting film. But okay, I'll watch it on Tubi. Um, the YouTube thing had almost no commercials, so but okay. Thank you for the heads up. Um,
The
why are
Tubi
you
one
calling
doesn't
it the?
hardly either, so good.
Okay, good. Why are you calling it the Damned when in on Roku it's called These Are the Damned, and on the poster it's called These Are the Damned? What is there a definitive one way or the other, or is it both?
These Are the Damned is the American title that they gave to The Damned because there was another film called The Damned that they didn't want it confused with. But Yanni wanted to speak. Yanni, you just have to click on the thing. There you are. Yanni, welcome to UK Cinema History. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
It's Yoni, close enough. It doesn't hurt my feelings when somebody adds their own perception to how my name is said. You remind me of a man that I've listened to for years, my favorite storyteller, Leland Gaunt. I put a link to his channel, but you guys look like you could be cousins. Of course, you being the
He's a
better.
very good looking fellow. Very good looking fellow.
Had you
Go
ever
ahead.
heard?
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was
No,
gonna.
I just followed. I just looked at the link.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say you guys look like cousins. Of course, you're the better looking of the two. Um, but I wonder if it would. I wonder if you would like him uh, as much. It seems like the theme that you're talking about and your excitement over the topics of the stories is very much so parallel with his. And then with the aesthetics being so similar, I wonder if he's your story soulmate.
I will definitely check him out, Yanni, and thank you for bringing him to our attention. And I'll put the link in the description on our Spotify and Apple versions of the podcast. Did you have anything else, or can we go to High's? He said he had more than final remarks.
Oh, I'm good. This is my first time in the room. I only came in here because I saw your face and I thought you were him. And so that's what brought me in. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh, well, we're talking about Horror of Dracula. And Hi, back to you.
Thank you, Yoni, for sharing. Thank you, Eric, for being a doppelganger of Yoni, one of Yoni's favorite storytellers.
Very attractive man. You have to take a look. This guy's very good looking.
As are you. So, I'm just, there's a bunch of trivia from IMDb that I actually didn't get to address. So let me run through that. First of all, I want to give credit where credit is due. It was Terence Fisher. I'll read it directly as it appears in IMDb. Terence Fisher, after a few botched takes, reportedly told actress Melissa Stribling, "Just imagine you've had the best sex of your life all night long!" Exclamation point. Providing exactly the right motivation. They then proceeded to wrap the scene on the next take. So that was Terence Fisher. So contrary to Christopher Lee, sometimes he could provide spot-on direction. Christopher Lee has only 16 lines in the entire film, which takes place over 10 minutes. And he actually only appears for 7.5 minutes in terms of actual screen time. So it's a testament to his power that he makes such an impact when he's only on screen for 7.5 minutes. Also, testament to director Terence Fisher. Christopher Lee, two interesting things about Lee. He's one of only two actors to play both Dracula and Frankenstein. Eric, do you know who the other actor is?
Lon Chaney? Yeah, Lon Chaney maybe. I don't know. I
Bela
don't.
Lugosi.
I was close.
No, you were. You were close.
I was way
Bela
off.
Lugosi
I was
played
completely off.
Bela Lugosi played Dracula in Dracula, and he played Frankenstein's. Oh, he played Dracula in Dracula, and also Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and he played Frankenstein's monster in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. The other interesting, another interesting thing about Christopher Lee, he's the only actor that we know of who played both Sherlock Holmes and Sherlock Holmes' brother, Mycroft. He has played both of those roles. The Mycroft, of course, in the famous Billy Wilder movie, The Secret Life of Sherlock Holmes. And by the way, Christopher Lee said Billy Wilder is his favorite director of all time, which, I'll agree with that. That would probably be my pick as well. According to Christopher Lee's biography, he was paid, excuse me, he was paid £750 for playing Dracula. I don't know what that translates into dollars. Eric, do you have an idea of what £750 would be in dollars?
$820.
And the film grossed $25 million. So, by the way, his cape that he wore as Dracula was lost for years, and then it turned up, and it was valued at $50,000. Just a cape. So, So sometimes, you have to take a role for whatever you can get, and hope that it leads to bigger things financially. Of course, Peter Cushing received the top billing. Um, that's another odd thing about the film. Peter Cushing received top billing. He doesn't turn up until 23 minutes into the film. That's an unusual way of doing things as well. Um, One of my other favorite scenes is with Miles Malleson, who plays the Undertaker, who does this really odd scene where we thought it was hilarious that someone came to his funeral parlor to grieve a loved one, and while walking down the stairs tripped and died from the fall. And he thought that was hilarious. That he came to pay his respects, and he never left. That scene is unlike anything else in the movie, and I'm not sure what to make of it. But it fascinates me that particular scene. There's nothing else like it in the movie. And by the way, the actor previously played an Undertaker in Dead of Night, so that's interesting too. Um, we previously mentioned composer James Bernard and the brilliant work he did on the score. Among the things he said in interviews is he composed the main three-note theme by breaking the word Dracula down to its three syllables, Dracula. Um, This approach would influence many low-budget scores for years to come. Um, so that's interesting. Oh, here we go. This is from IMDb. The now iconic use of two crossed candlesticks to form a makeshift crucifix was suggested by actor Peter Cushing, who thought his character had used too many regular crucifixes in the story already. He also suggested that his character run across the long dining room table to leap upon the closed curtains, tearing them down, exposing Dracula to the sunlight to increase the action. So there you go. Those are the two main elements of the best scene in the film, and they're both from Peter Cushing. Um, and as I said, Peter Cushing did the stunt himself, despite the studio's concerns he might injure himself. So kudos 1,000% to Peter Cushing for all his wonderful contributions of being studious student of detail. And by the way, you mentioned you loved how he handled the blood transfusion scene. In Frankenstein, he consulted with actual surgeons to find out how they handled their scalpels, how they moved, how they held their bodies, how they moved, so that he would appear realistic in the scenes where he's cutting up cadavers. So yeah, he would do his research. He really cared about details, and God bless him for it. And that's everything I have.
Excellent. Hi, Sila. First of all, have we convinced you to see the movie? And second of all, where can people find you on the internet? And what upcoming rooms do you have that you might want to plug?
Well, I thank you again, even though I made the mistake for this film. After hearing this conversation, I must watch this film. I need to inspire you to watch the one with Klaus Kinski, which is actually by Werner Herzog. I think it's a very good movie. And I wanted very much to do something for Kinski tomorrow, but I will be working tomorrow, and I was not able to make a decision between Wojciech, Aguirre, and this vampire film. But maybe at some other point we can do it. It doesn't have to be on his birthday. Uh, one may find me at silablume.life, and that's where I share all the birthdays that I celebrate on Clubhouse, as well as photography and thoughts about the way I see life. And that would let me double check here to see if I have something exciting coming up. 1 second, bear with me. So October. Well, there are a couple of things coming up. Um, Unfortunately, I'm not also sure about what to do with Elfriede Jelinek, a incredibly good dramatist and writer from Austria. Her birthday's on Sunday, so I'm going to try to do something for her. On the 22nd, I will be celebrating perhaps the best pianist composer ever, Franz Liszt. On the 23rd, Tarragó. Renata Tarragó was an excellent guitar player from Spain. And the next day, 24th, Gubaidulina. Sofia Gubaidulina is a very good composer from a certain part of Russia. So those would be the main things that I would mention in case anybody is interested in classical music on this level. You're more than welcome to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Sila. And for those listening on the podcast, Sila's knowledge on all things Wagnerian and Liszt is vast. Whenever he's speaking on either of those two, it's a not miss. It's a can't miss whether you like classical music or not. Hi, any final thoughts? And of course, where can people find you on the internet? And anything you want to plug?
First of all, I want to echo Sila's recommendation. Nosferatu the Vampire, or Vampire, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Vampyre, is a delightful film, 1979, Werner Herzog, and written and directed. Um, Eric and I have both seen it, and everyone should see that. It's a really great film. Um, Again, I want to, Eric, thank you for picking uh, a celebration of Hammer to celebrate this Halloween. It's been great fun so far with uh, Curse of Frankenstein and Horror of Dracula. And The Damned looks totally quirky and artistic and unique. And I'm great. I watched like the first 12 minutes, and I'm greatly looking forward to it. Thank you for your tip about QB. That's very much appreciated. And I just love this series. And I want to, again, remind folks after These Are the Damned, um, for the week after is going to be Halloween, and we are doing the abominable Dr. Phibes, and I'm greatly looking forward to that as well. By the way, Eric, did you make a decision about whether we will get to cover Dark Place, or did you decide to skip it?
I'm just gonna have to get with Matt on that, and we're gonna have to work around his schedule because that is Matt's Kaczynski Bradley's project, and I will post it as soon as Matt has gotten back to me.
Okay, that's
But
great to know.
yeah, we will be redoing it. I don't have a date yet. I want to
Thank you.
redo it before Halloween. That's the point. Go ahead, Yoni.
Oh, I'll wait my turn. I just wanted, before you close the room, if I could say something, I'm enjoying the discussion between you two. I'm
We
sorry
were
for
we were
interrupting.
go, we were definitely going to turn to you and ask you for some thoughts before we close the room. Plus, don't worry, I close the room with my voice. So we won't be closing it on you. So hi, did you have an internet address you wanted to direct people to, perhaps, if they needed you for something that you might need a best-selling ghost writer for?
Sure, thank you, Eric. So yeah, I am a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author and ghostwriter whose books have sold over 1 million copies. If you are looking for any help with making a book happen, please feel very encouraged to get in touch. My website is bookproposal.net. That's bookproposal, one word, .net. Or if you want any help in developing a screenplay or a TV series, I would love to help you with that as well. In that case, please visit my website, High on Your Script. That's high, H-Y, as in yellow, highyonyourscript.com. And thank you for listening. This is always a delightful podcast to be a part of. And I always appreciate Eric putting this together and doing this, and the vast amount of knowledge that Eric brings to every film. It's always incredibly impressive, and I'm always grateful for it. And Sila, always wonderful to have you be a part of it. I look forward to you seeing These Are the Damned for next week and you being a part of that. It's always great to see you and have you be in the room. And Yoni, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it and look forward to what you have to say.
Oh, thank you, Hi. I
It's
actually
all,
wanted to ask, oh, I'm sorry.
just saying, it's all yours, Johnny. And then if you want people to find you on the internet, you can tell us where at the end. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. Not being wanted to be found on the internet is something I actually have learned to respect the last couple of weeks. Go ahead. The floor is yours, Johnny.
Oh, thank you, Eric. Two parts for Hi. I read your profile. One is um, I'm big into the ghostwriters of yesteryear, particularly from the 18th century back, and detectiving around and finding the female writers who wrote under men's names. And I'm 85% sure that Shakespeare was a woman. That's something I think might be a interesting topic someday. And also, I'm an avid writer, but I'm not a learned writer. I would like somebody to look at my um, writings and see if there's potential in it to be edited and published. Um, I'm not emotionally attached to being published. I'll write even if everybody says it sucks. I do it because I love it. But if it is worthy, how would I go about having somebody look at it and say, "Oh, honey, yeah, just keep it to yourself," or "Ooh, there's really something there."
Yeah, it's too bad there isn't a Facebook room on Saturdays that covers that, isn't there? Hi.
Facebook? What are you
I'm
talking
sorry,
about?
Clubhouse. Yeah, I forgot where I was for a moment. Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah,
Yeah, Clubhouse doesn't
no,
have a room that they
it's
cover
okay.
that.
Both of those references are inappropriate to the question. So, uh, if you have material that is in like a Word document, you could email it to me. I could take a quick look. Um, if you were interested in hiring me, but you have to pay for it. So I would say go to my website at bookproposal.net get a sense of what my background is, what I charge, and I wouldn't charge you anything to take a quick look, just to determine if I might be the right fit. If I was the right fit, then I would quote you a charge for carefully reading it all, and then having maybe a 2 to 3 hour discussion with you about it. But first, I would need to determine if I could actually be of help. So the first step, if you were interested, would be just email me and for me to take a quick look to see if I was the right fit. I'd say, go to my website if you feel that I might possibly be the right fit, and if I'm in your budget, then you can just email me your material. My email address is on my website, right under my photo. So entirely up to you. But if you feel we might be a good match, I'd be delighted to receive your Word document or Word documents.
Oh, thank you. I feel like you would be honest, only because you're successful and you're not just taking people on just to take money from people. I don't think you would waste your time on somebody if they didn't have the talent. So I feel like you're the right fit. First of all, because I love your energy when you speak, and second of all, because I don't think you would waste your time with a loser. If I was, I'm fine with that.
Well, I'm just honest. So the other stuff you said, there's truth to that, but I'm honest. Period. Stop. So the other stuff doesn't matter. I'm honest with everybody. Eric has seen me be very honest in this room with people.
And he wastes up to 3 hours a week with me. So you know. Anyway, a lot of success stories with Hyde, so I do recommend taking a look at his website. And of course, it's always a pleasure to be able to talk movies with him once a week. I am currently doing this from a parking lot at a Winn-Dixie because a hurricane has knocked out both my power and my internet, because I so look forward to this. This is the highlight of my week. So, and I would like to take a moment to thank the good folks at Winn-Dixie for allowing me to keep my phone charged and use their internet during this crisis. And one of them brought me chicken to eat for lunch today while I was in Don Field's room. So, very nice people over there at Winn-Dixie here in Valdosta, Georgia, on Ashley. So they definitely earned that plug. If not for all of the free internet, for the free chicken alone, because nothing tastes better than free chicken. I'm gonna, unless anybody's got anything else, I'm gonna close the room just by reminding everyone that next week's film again is The Damned, or These Are the Damned, was the American. I misspoke. The film that they were trying to keep it from being confused with was Village of the Damned. That's why they gave it the American name. Not the Damned. It was the Village of the Damned, because they both involved children that they were afraid it would be confused with. So that's why they renamed it These Are the Damned, so that people wouldn't think it was a sequel to Village of the Damned. And then please join us for a very special episode on Halloween night, where we do the makeup episode from Hurricane Helene having canceled the Abominable Dr. Phibes. Plus, we're going to have some special guests on that Halloween episode, who are going to kind of give it a little spookier flavor. It's going to be more of a Halloween party with a film discussion at the center. So definitely join us for Halloween. A lot to look forward to there. Other than that, I'd like to thank our regular panel of Sila Blume, Hi, Bender. Yazzie Sophie couldn't make it today, but I thank her in spirit. Yoni, thank you for speaking. Michelle, April, and Ann, we appreciate you being in the audience. This is always a lot easier podcast to record if we've got people to speak to. Those who are listening to us on Spotify, Apple, Facebook, or any of the other streaming platforms, please give us whatever it is, a like, a rating, and subscribe. And we'll see you next week for The Damned, or These Are the Damned. And other than that, I'm going to be closing this room unless anybody has anything in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good night, everybody, and we'll see you next week.